The desert wind of Kandahar province was cruel, hot by day, freezing by night, and relentless at all hours. The soldiers stationed at Camp Viper had learned to live with it. Dust coated everything: boots, weapons, even the air they breathed. Emily Carter adjusted her scarf and squinted through the pale morning haze. She'd been deployed for 3 weeks now, working reconnaissance with Task Force Sentinel, a specialized unit under General Marcus Holden's direct command. Holden was a legend in his own right, a hard-edged tactician whose career stretched from Iraq to the Balkans. He was known for his unbreakable discipline and his refusal to tolerate anything less than perfection. His soldiers feared him, respected him, and sometimes hated him, but no one ignored him. That morning, the camp buzzed with tension. A new directive had arrived. One of the region's most dangerous insurgent leaders had resurfaced, and Holden's unit was being tasked with neutralizing him. The operation would be fast, silent, and surgical. Holden strode across the camp's dusty courtyard, his boots crunching on gravel. His voice carried authority, even when calm. "We've got limited intel, gentlemen. We'll be operating 30 clicks north of here. Terrain's rough, elevation high, and the enemy knows we're coming. I'll need our best eyes up front." He paused, scanning the line of soldiers standing at attention. "Any snipers here?" Hands went up, a dozen of them. Men with rugged faces, scarred from years of combat. Holden nodded. Then his gaze stopped on one soldier at the end of the line, a smaller figure standing perfectly still. Emily Carter. The general's eyes narrowed slightly. "You?" "Yes, sir," Emily replied. Her voice was calm, level, neither defiant nor timid. The soldiers around her exchanged glances. One of them, a burly sergeant named Rickson, smirked and whispered, "Guess we're counting airsoft players now." Holden heard it, but ignored him. His focus remained on Emily. "You trained under Colonel Hayes, right?" "Yes, sir." "Sniper qualification. Top of class." He crossed his arms. "Top of class means nothing out here, Sergeant. Out here, wind and dust make liars out of rifles." "I understand, sir." Holden studied her for another moment, then motioned toward the far ridge, where a rusted vehicle wreck sat half buried in sand. "See that old pickup? Range is about 2 clicks, give or take. Let's see what top of class means in the real world." The courtyard went silent. The other soldiers stepped back to watch. Some wore grins. Others folded their arms skeptically. Emily said nothing. She moved with practiced calm, unpacking her rifle, a modified .338 Lapua Magnum. It was clean, precise, and unmistakably cared for. She lay prone in the sand, her elbows steady, eyes narrowing behind her scope. The wind whispered across the dunes, shifting the mirage. Emily watched the way the heat waves shimmered. She calculated distance, drop, and drift in her head, her father's voice echoing from long ago. "Trust the stillness between gusts, Emmy. The world always pauses before the right shot." She slowed her breathing. Inhale. Hold. Exhale. Holden watched her through binoculars, expression unreadable. Then crack. The shot rang out. A split second later, a metallic clang echoed across the desert. The bullet had ripped through the truck's license plate, dead center. A murmur swept through the crowd. Holden didn't react. He waited as Emily reloaded and fired again. Another clean hit, this time through the rear-view mirror. She lowered her rifle and looked up, face calm as ever. "Target neutralized, sir." Holden stared for a long moment, and finally lowered his binoculars. "All right, Sergeant," he said evenly. "You'll do." The onlookers dispersed in silence. Rickson muttered something under his breath, but didn't finish it. No one else dared to speak. Later that evening, the desert turned gold beneath a fading sun. Emily sat outside her tent, cleaning her rifle in silence. Diaz approached, holding 2 canteens. "Hell of a show today," he said, tossing her one. She looked up, faint smile forming. "Didn't feel like a show." He sat beside her, stretching his legs. "The general's a tough one to impress." "You just made half the unit nervous." Emily shrugged. "If they're nervous, they're not focused." "Yeah, well, you're focused enough for 10 people," Diaz said. "What's your secret anyway?" She wiped the bolt assembly with a cloth. "Patience. And quiet. Quiet? Noise makes people rush. When you stop listening to yourself breathe, you stop shooting straight." Diaz let out a low whistle. "No wonder you're a ghost out there." She smiled faintly. "Ghost Eye, huh? Sounds like a bad movie title." He laughed. "Maybe, but it's catching on." At 0400 hours, Holden's voice boomed over the comms. "All units, assemble for briefing." The team gathered under the canvas command tent. Maps covered the table, marked with red dots and lines tracing the valley terrain. Holden leaned over them, eyes sharp. "Our target is Sami Aldair, insurgent leader, responsible for 3 recent ambushes. Satellite recon places him here." He tapped a marked compound on the map. "North Ridge, heavily guarded. We can't risk air support." "That means precision." He looked at Emily. "That means you." The air thickened. Emily simply nodded. Holden continued, "Carter and Diaz will take high ground 2 clicks east of the compound. Provide overwatch. Once we confirm visual on Aldair, you take the shot. The rest of us move in to secure the area." "Yes, sir." "Remember," Holden added, "we get 1 chance. Miss, and we're walking into hell." The convoy departed before dawn. The hum of engines and the crunch of gravel filled the silence. Emily sat in the back, rifle case across her knees, eyes closed as she visualized the terrain. Every kilometer brought them closer to the unknown. When they reached the drop point, Diaz turned to her. "You ready, Ghost Eye?" Emily checked her rifle, then the wind direction. "Always." They moved out on foot, crawling up the ridge through sand and shale. The climb was brutal, the heat suffocating even before sunrise. When they reached position, Diaz set up the spotting scope while Emily unpacked her rifle. "Visibility's low," Diaz muttered, glassing the compound below. "You sure about this?" Emily didn't answer immediately. She adjusted her scope, fine-tuning the magnification. Through the haze, she could see movement, guards pacing, a truck idling. Then, a man stepped out of a shaded doorway, tall, robed, surrounded by soldiers. "There," she said. Diaz frowned. "That's him?" Emily nodded. "Aldair. Watch how the others react. Nobody walks in front of him." Holden's voice crackled softly through her earpiece. "Visual confirmed?" "Confirmed, sir," Emily replied. "All right, Sergeant. Make it clean." She centered her reticle on the target's chest. "Wind speed, 8 knots crosswind. Distance minus 2,050 meters. Humidity to 14%. She adjusted her scope clicks by instinct, feeling the rhythm of the air. Diaz whispered, 2 clicks is pushing it." Emily's voice was calm. "Not if you breathe right." The wind slowed for a heartbeat, that perfect, fleeting stillness. Crack. The bullet cut through the heat. Seconds later, impact. The target dropped. Guards scrambled in chaos as Holden's unit stormed in from the west. Diaz exhaled. Direct hit. Emily lowered her rifle and whispered, "Target neutralized." When the dust settled, General Holden approached them at the ridge. His face was unreadable, but his eyes carried quiet pride. 2,000 meters, he said. "Clean kill, no collateral." Emily stood, saluting. "Just doing my job, sir." Holden looked at her rifle, then back at her. "Sergeant Carter, I've commanded dozens of marksmen in my life, and not one of them could have made that shot under this wind." She said nothing. He smirked faintly. "You ever think of teaching?" Emily shook her head. "Not yet, sir." "Still learning." Holden nodded. "Good. Keep that attitude. Pride ruins precision." As he walked away, Diaz chuckled. "That's the closest thing to a compliment you'll ever get from him." Emily smiled softly. "Then I'll take it." But deep down, she knew this was only the beginning. The war was far from over. And somewhere out there, a challenge waited, one that would test not just her skill, but her very belief in what it meant to pull the trigger. The sun rose hard and merciless over Camp Viper the next morning, painting the tents and armored vehicles in a harsh golden light. Dust drifted lazily in the air, the same dust that clung to every memory of Afghanistan. For most soldiers, a mission like the one Emily Carter had just completed would have been the highlight of a career. For Emily, it was simply another day of focus and breath. Her perfect 2,000-meter shot had made its way through the camp faster than wildfire. Soldiers who had once laughed behind her back now spoke her name in lowered voices, sometimes with admiration, sometimes with envy. "2 clicks and a crosswind," said one corporal at breakfast, shaking his head. "Nobody hits that clean. Not even Diaz." Diaz smirked, chewing his toast. "That's because I trained her." Emily, sitting across from him, lifted an eyebrow. "Trained me?" "Sure," he said with mock seriousness. "Moral support counts as training." She smiled faintly, sipping her coffee. "Then you're a world-class instructor." A few nearby soldiers chuckled, but not everyone was amused. Across the mess hall, Sergeant Rickson sat with his team, glaring at her. He had been one of the unit's best marksmen before Emily's arrival, or so he liked to believe. Her success had quietly dethroned him, and his ego didn't take it well. "She just got lucky," Rickson muttered to his buddy. "Wind caught it right. You know how it is." His friend shrugged. General didn't look like he thought it was luck. Rickson's jaw tightened. "That's because Holden's obsessed with his little poster soldier. Wait till she screws up. We'll see how top of class she really is." That afternoon, the unit gathered for debriefing in the operations tent. General Holden stood before a wall map peppered with red pins. His presence demanded silence. "Good work yesterday," he said. "Al-Dahir's cell just lost its head. But his lieutenants are regrouping fast. We expect retaliation." The map showed a ring of valleys north of Kandahar, the kind of terrain that swallowed men whole. Holden pointed to a spot deep in the red zone. "This ridge here," he said, "has been broadcasting encrypted signals we can't trace. Intel thinks it's a sniper overwatch nest used by enemy forces. Whoever's there is good. They've taken down 2 convoys this week. We're calling it Operation Silent Dust, and I need the best eyes for the job." His gaze landed squarely on Emily. "Carter," he asked, "you're leading Overwatch." A murmur rippled through the tent. Rickson shifted in his chair, visibly irritated. Holden continued, "Your mission is simple. Find their sniper. Neutralize him. Then call in ground forces. You'll move before dawn." He paused, his tone softening slightly. "And Carter, good work yesterday. You've earned this one." The words hung in the air. For Holden, that was rare praise. But for Rickson, it was fuel on fire. By nightfall, Emily was preparing her gear. Every piece of equipment had its ritual. She checked the rifle's barrel for dust, wiped the scope lenses with microfiber cloth, counted each bullet, and double-checked her backup magazine. Diaz packed the spotting scope and rangefinder, humming quietly to himself. "You ever sleep?" he asked her. "Only when the rifle's clean," she said, tightening her sling. Diaz grinned. You know, most people would celebrate after a shot like yesterday. Go brag, get a photo with the general or something. Emily looked up. Bragging's just noise. I like quiet. Yeah, Diaz said softly. You and your wind. They exchanged a look, one of respect, not romance, but something stronger than words. Soldiers didn't always need to speak to understand. They left camp at 0300 hours in 2 armored trucks under cover of darkness. The sky was an ocean of black stars. No headlights, no chatter. Just the hum of engines and the occasional hiss of static on the radio. By sunrise, they had reached the ridge, jagged rock formations overlooking a barren valley. Diaz set up the scope while Emily crawled into position beside him, adjusting her ghillie suit so the desert swallowed her whole. Range? She asked quietly. Diaz looked through the glass. About 1,600 meters to the east ridge. But I'm not seeing movement yet. Emily scanned the horizon through her scope. The valley below shimmered with heat. Nothing moved except the wind curling through dust. Patience, she murmured. They waited. Hours bled into one another. The desert was merciless, hot enough to bake through their uniforms. Sweat trickled down Emily's spine, but her breathing never wavered. Finally, Diaz whispered, movement. 2, maybe 3 figures. Looks like they're setting up a tripod. Emily focused, eyes narrowing. Through the heat distortion, she spotted the telltale glint of a long barrel. Sniper team, she said. Diaz nodded. Winds shifting, south by southwest, 8 knots. Emily made her adjustments. The distance was long but manageable. She waited for the enemy sniper to settle. When the man's head tilted down to peer through his scope, she fired. Crack. The target jerked, then slumped. The radio hissed. Confirmed impact, Holden's voice said. But before they could exhale in relief, a second glint flashed from the opposite ridge. A counter-sniper. Second shooter. Diaz shouted. The first bullet missed by inches, chipping stone near Emily's arm. The second came closer. Move! Diaz barked, pulling the spotting scope aside. Emily rolled behind a rock, breathing slow even as bullets kicked up sand around them. Range? She demanded. 3 clicks, no way you can hit that with this wind. Diaz yelled. She crawled out, peering through her scope again. The enemy sniper was good, fast, disciplined, and invisible, except for the faint flash of glass. Emily whispered, I see him. Carter, this is insane. But she was already adjusting her rifle. He's lining up for another shot. She exhaled, long, deliberate, and fired. For several heartbeats, there was silence. Then, through the scope, she saw the man fall backward. Diaz blinked. You just... Target neutralized, she said calmly. He laughed, half in disbelief. You're out of your damn mind, you know that? Emily smiled faintly. You've been saying that since North Carolina. When they returned to base, Holden was waiting by the landing pad. His expression gave nothing away. 2 confirmed snipers down, Diaz reported. Both long range. Holden turned to Emily. 3 kilometers in shifting wind. He shook his head slightly. That's not training. That's instinct. Emily said nothing. She didn't like praise. It made her feel exposed. Holden studied her another moment. Good work, Sergeant. Keep this up, and you'll be rewriting our range manuals. As he walked off, Diaz muttered, You just broke the camp record, by the way. Emily wiped the dust from her face. Records don't matter. Then what does? She looked toward the desert horizon, glowing red under the dying sun. The next shot. That night, the base was alive with rumors. Some soldiers congratulated her. Others whispered that no one could be that good, that maybe Diaz had made the shot and she'd taken credit. The whispers didn't bother Emily. But one thing did. Rickson's stare from across the yard, sharp with bitterness. He approached her near the shooting range as she was packing up. "You think you're special, huh?" he said, voice tight. "You got the general wrapped around your finger. Everyone calling you Ghost Eye. You know how many men out here earned that name before you?" Emily didn't look at him. Names don't mean much in the field. Rickson stepped closer. "You make one mistake, Carter, one, and everyone will see you're just lucky." She stood, meeting his glare. "Then you'd better hope I never get unlucky, Sergeant." The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend the air. Rickson sneered and walked away, boots crunching hard against gravel. Emily exhaled slowly, eyes drifting toward the dark sky above Camp Viper. Luck had nothing to do with it. But she also knew every legend comes with a shadow. And in this war, shadows had a way of shooting back. The desert had a way of stealing time. 1 week blurred into the next at Camp Viper, each day measured by the distant crack of rifle fire and the low hum of helicopters passing overhead. The mission against Al-Dahir's remnants had become a chess game, and Emily Carter was one of the queen pieces on the board, powerful but always exposed. After the double sniper kill, her reputation had taken on a life of its own. Soldiers started calling her Ghost's Wind, the invisible force that hit before you ever heard it coming. Diaz teased her about it, but deep down, he knew she'd earned the name. Her precision was uncanny. Even veteran marksmen came to her for advice. But with fame came pressure. The higher she climbed, the more they expected her to never miss. One late afternoon, General Holden called her to the operations tent. The air inside was tense. Satellite images were spread across the table, showing a cluster of structures deep within the mountains of Helmand Province, far from any safe zone. "This," Holden began, tapping the map, "is called Dara Coast. We believe it's the new command site for what's left of Al-Dahir's network." Emily leaned closer. The satellite images showed 3 ridges surrounding a narrow canyon, perfect sniper country. Holden continued, "Intel suggests they've hired a mercenary sniper. Ex-Spetsnaz. Codename Volk, Russian?" Diaz asked from the back. Holden nodded. "And one of the best. He's been credited with over 40 confirmed kills, including Americans." The tent went quiet. Holden's eyes hardened. "He's taken 2 convoys in the past 10 days. I'm not sending any more men into that valley until Volk is neutralized." Then his gaze locked onto Emily. "Carter, you'll take point. I want eyes on that ridge by sunrise. Find him, track him, and if you get the chance." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Emily's voice was steady. "Understood, sir." That night, as she packed her gear, Diaz noticed the faint tremor in her hands. "You ever miss, Carter?" he asked quietly. "Sometimes," she said. "Just not with bullets." Diaz frowned. "What does that mean?" She zipped her pack shut. "It means every time we pull the trigger, someone's story ends. Doesn't matter whose side they're on. It always costs something." He nodded slowly. "You think too much." "Someone has to," she replied. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the tent flaps. It carried the dry smell of sand and something else, anticipation. They left before dawn, traveling light. 2 other soldiers accompanied them as backup. Corporal Jenkins, a rookie spotter eager to prove himself, and Sergeant Miles, a seasoned ranger who'd seen more combat than sleep. The 4 moved across the wasteland in silence, their boots sinking into loose gravel. By mid-morning, they reached the first ridge overlooking Dara Coast. Emily crawled into position and unfolded her rifle's bipod, the scope glinting in the early sun. "Diaz range?" He scanned through his spotter's scope. 3.8 clicks to the far ridge. Too far for a clean shot, she murmured. Diaz exhaled. You planning to close the gap? Yeah, but slowly. Volk's probably watching already. And he was. Through the scope, Emily saw a faint shimmer across the opposite ridge. A telltale glint of glass. She froze. Diaz, she whispered, he's got eyes on us. Already? She shifted slightly, adjusting her scope to catch the angle. It wasn't much, just a flicker of sunlight off a lens, but it was enough. He's smart, she said. He's not exposing himself. Using a decoy rock for cover. So what's the play? Diaz asked. Emily's lips thinned. We wait. Make him think we left. For the next several hours, they lay motionless beneath camouflage nets. The heat was brutal, pressing down like a physical weight. Miles and Jenkins shifted occasionally, whispering curses under their breath. Emily, however, didn't move. Her heartbeat was slow, her breathing even the rhythm of patience carved from years of training. Finally, just as the light began to fade, a silhouette appeared on the far ridge. Got him, Diaz murmured. Emily's scope found the target. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a desert cloak that broke his outline. He was using a modified Dragunov with custom optics. Winds unpredictable, Diaz said, his voice tight. 9 knots, variable crossflow. Emily didn't answer. She was studying his movement. Volk wasn't rushing. He was calculating, like a predator testing the air before the strike. Then a flash. Down! Emily shouted. The shot cracked across the valley, hitting the rock inches from Jenkins' leg. The young corporal froze, panic flooding his face. He's zeroed us. Miles barked. Emily cursed under her breath. Volk was good. Too good. His elevation and wind compensation were near perfect. If she hadn't ducked, one of them would be gone already. Carter, Diaz hissed. He's repositioning. East slope. Emily crawled left, her body moving like water. She angled her rifle upward, recalibrating distance and drop. 3,900 meters. A range few had ever even attempted. She took a long breath. Diaz, range confirmed? 3-9-1-7. Wind shift, 12 knots east, decreasing. Copy. She steadied her rifle. The scope crosshairs danced slightly with each heartbeat. She slowed her pulse, aligning it with her breath. For a moment, there was no sound, no war, no desert, just her and the wind. Then she fired. The rifle bucked. Dust rose, but no hit. Volk shifted again, faster now, firing 2 return shots that slammed into the rocks beside her. One shard grazed her cheek. Missed. Diaz shouted. Emily didn't answer. She reloaded, adjusted by 0.5 mil radian, and fired again. This time, through the scope, she saw Volk's shoulder jerk, blood spraying in the fading light. Hit, Diaz breathed. You hit him. But the Russian didn't fall. He staggered, then dropped into cover, disappearing behind the ridge. Not enough, Emily muttered. He's still alive. Miles slammed a fist into the dirt. We can't chase him, Carter. Not in the dark. Emily's jaw tightened. She looked out into the black horizon where Volk had vanished. He'll move before dawn. So will we? They set up a temporary hideout that night, taking turns on watch. The desert grew cold, the air sharp as glass. Diaz watched Emily clean her rifle in silence. Finally, he said, You almost died out there. I know. You ever get scared? She looked up. Every time. Then how do you keep steady? She smiled faintly. Fear's just wind. You don't stop it. You learn to read it. Diaz chuckled softly. You sound like Holden. Emily shook her head. Holden reads people. I read ghosts. Before dawn, they moved again, down the slope, toward a cluster of boulders that offered cover. The valley below was still and gray. Emily's cheeks still stung from the earlier graze, but her eyes were sharp, alive. They found traces of blood, boot prints heading north. Volk was hurt, but not dead. He's retreating, Diaz said. Probably regrouping with spotters. Or baiting us, Emily replied. Miles frowned. You think he wants you to follow? She nodded slowly. He knows who we are now. He wants a duel. Jenkins swallowed hard. Like sniper against sniper? Emily's voice was flat. Exactly that. By sunrise, they reached the next ridge, the highest point overlooking the valley. Emily unpacked her rifle again, settling into position. Diaz range? 200 meters, he said after a long pause. That's impossible. She didn't respond. The morning wind was fierce, unpredictable, gusts moving in opposite directions between ridges. It was the kind of shot that defied math. But Emily Carter wasn't thinking about math. She was thinking about breath, patience, and stillness. She closed her eyes for a moment. She could almost feel the ghost of wind brushing against her skin, the same force she'd trusted all her life. When she opened her eyes, the crosshairs were steady. Diaz, she whispered. Tell the general. I've got his sniper. Then she pressed the trigger. The desert held its breath. Emily Carter lay flat against the rocky ridge, her heartbeat slow and measured, the stock of her rifle pressed tight against her shoulder. The world beyond her scope was silent, the kind of silence that made sound itself feel like an intruder. The wind whispered in uneven bursts, brushing grains of sand across her cheek. Diaz crouched beside her, watching the distant ridge through the spotting scope. His voice came out low, barely a breath. 4,200 meters. Crosswind, fluctuating between 7 and 9 knots. You can't predict that. Emily didn't respond. Her left hand adjusted the elevation dial, fingers steady, movements deliberate. Carter, Diaz said again, a little sharper now. You're pushing physics. Even the best rifles can't stay stable that far out. Her voice was calm, almost distant. Then I'll make the wind stable. Diaz sighed. You're insane. She smiled faintly. You've said that before. The ridge opposite was barely visible through the haze. Heat shimmered above the rocks, warping everything like a mirage. Somewhere within that distortion was Volk, the enemy sniper who had already killed dozens. Through her scope, Emily could just make out a sliver of movement, the faint shift of a barrel between rocks. The bastard was patient too. He knew she was there. He was waiting for her to fire first. It was a duel of ghosts. She exhaled slowly, calculating everything: elevation, humidity, barometric pressure, and the microshifts in the air that only her instincts could read. Diaz, confirmed temperature, she said. 34 Celsius. Air density? Low. Almost zero wind resistance up here. She nodded. Then the bullet's going to drift right. About 2 mils. She adjusted again. Her hands moved like she was sculpting something invisible. Down below, the valley stretched endless and empty, scarred with dried riverbeds and broken rock. A hawk circled lazily above them, wings steady against the wind. Even nature seemed to wait. Diaz wiped sweat from his brow. We've got 5 minutes before the sun hits his ridge. Once it does, he'll have the light advantage. Emily's eyes stayed fixed on her scope. Then he's got 4 minutes to breathe. She inhaled deeply through her nose, then let it out through her mouth, each breath syncing with her pulse. Her mind was a still lake now. No sound, no movement. Dialing 4.2, she whispered, adjusting the final setting. The crosshair hovered over the spot she knew Volk would peek from. She could almost feel him on the other end, waiting, calculating, daring her. "Ready," she said softly. Diaz's voice was barely a whisper. Range confirmed. Wind steady. Wait, gust shift north. "I know." "You can't possibly." Her finger brushed the trigger, and the world stopped. The shot rang out like a thunderclap. The recoil hit her shoulder, dust exploding from the ground. The bullet tore through the morning air at nearly a kilometer per second, its supersonic wake slicing the silence. At 4,200 meters, even sound lagged behind. It took nearly 10 seconds before Diaz spoke again. "Nothing yet," he murmured. "Come on." Then a flicker. Through the scope, Emily saw it, a small, sharp collapse of movement. The shape that had haunted her through 2 missions dropped backward, motionless. "Impact," Diaz breathed. His voice trembled. "Jesus Christ." "You hit him." Emily didn't move. She kept her eye on the scope, confirming. The figure was still. No wind, no trickery, just silence. Diaz's voice rose, louder now. "You hit him. That's over 4,000 meters. No one's ever done that." She slowly lowered the rifle, her hands steady, but her chest rising with controlled breath. Target neutralized. Diaz stared at her, eyes wide. "You just broke every record in the book." Emily shook her head. "Records are for trophies. He's not getting up. That's what matters." They radioed command. Holden's voice came through, calm but heavy with disbelief. "Say again, Sergeant Carter." "Confirm your distance." 4,200 meters, sir." "Confirmed kill." A long pause. Then, "Good God." There was static and a faint murmur of voices. People in the command tent reacting. Holden came back on. "Outstanding work, Sergeant. You and your team returned to base immediately. You've done more than I could have asked." "Copy that," Emily replied, voice neutral. She started breaking down her rifle, every part placed carefully back into its case, her movements almost ceremonial. Diaz was still shaking his head in disbelief. "You don't even look surprised," he said. "Do you realize what you just did?" Emily gave a faint, tired smile. "I realized it the moment I pulled the trigger." The journey back to Camp Viper was quiet. Even the air felt different. Jenkins and Miles rode in silence, casting occasional glances at Emily. The rumor had already spread through the radio net. A 4,200-meter confirmed kill. The kind of shot legends were made from. When they arrived, half the base seemed to be waiting. Soldiers who had barely spoken to her before now clapped her on the back, their eyes filled with awe. Someone shouted, "Ghost's wind did it." And the chant caught on, echoing through the dusty air. Emily hated it. Holden met her outside the command tent, expression unreadable. He dismissed the crowd with a wave and looked her squarely in the eye. "You know what you just did, Carter?" he asked quietly. "Yes, sir. You made history." She nodded slightly. "Permission to debrief, sir?" Holden studied her face. He saw the exhaustion, the faint cut on her cheek, the steadiness that came not from pride, but control. "Permission granted." "But, Carter," he said softly, leaning closer. "Don't ever forget what it cost." She met his eyes. "I never do." That night, the celebration went on without her. While others laughed and drank, Emily sat alone by the firing range, cleaning her rifle under the dim light of a lantern. The smell of oil and metal was comforting, familiar. Diaz found her there an hour later. "You could at least pretend to enjoy being famous." "I'm not famous," she said, not looking up. "I'm a weapon." He frowned. "You're human, Emily. Don't lose that." She paused, hands still. Then she said quietly, "Do you know what it means to hit someone from 4,200 meters, Diaz? You can't see their face. You can't even tell who they were. You just erase them. That distance doesn't make it easier. It makes it worse." He sat beside her, silent. "After a while," she added, "I can still feel the wind from that shot. Like it's still moving somewhere out there." Diaz glanced at her rifle case. "You did what had to be done. That's all." "Maybe," she said softly. "But that's how ghosts are made." The next morning, General Holden held a small ceremony. Officially, her kill was logged as the longest confirmed sniper shot in U.S. military history. The report would later be classified, but whispers of it spread far beyond the desert. As she stood at attention, Holden handed her a medal she didn't want. Cameras clicked. The base cheered. "Sergeant Emily Carter," Holden said aloud, "for unparalleled precision, courage, and service to her unit." But Emily wasn't listening. Her eyes drifted toward the distant horizon. Somewhere beyond it, the wind moved endlessly through the empty ridges, carrying silence and memory. When Holden finished, she saluted and turned away. Because legends, she thought, didn't need applause, only distance. The morning after her impossible shot, Camp Viper buzzed like a hornet's nest. Journalists from military networks had started sending requests through official channels. Pentagon liaisons called for reports. Even generals from other bases were asking for interviews. Emily Carter, however, wanted none of it. She sat alone in her barracks, her rifle case beside her, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had long gone cold. The world called her a hero. Inside, she just felt hollow. The desert outside was quiet, wind brushing against the tent walls like whispers. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw it again. The moment the trigger broke, the silence stretching for 10 long seconds, the tiny blur of motion collapsing through her scope. She'd been trained to feel satisfaction in a confirmed kill. But satisfaction never came. Only the echo of breath, the strange awareness that someone's life had vanished because of her precision. General Holden found her that afternoon. His boots crunched softly against the gravel as he entered. "Still hiding from the noise?" he asked. Emily looked up, eyes tired but steady. "I'm not hiding, sir. Just thinking." "Thinking's dangerous for soldiers," Holden said dryly. He stood across from her, arms folded. "You know what the higher-ups are calling you? A national asset. They want to fly you back to D.C. for debrief and publicity." Emily frowned. "Publicity?" Holden sighed. "They want to show America a face, a symbol of precision and discipline. A female sniper breaking every record. It sells. I'm not a brand, sir." He smiled faintly. "Try telling the Pentagon that." Then his tone softened. "Carter, you did something extraordinary. But you need to remember something. The more they lift you up, the less you belong to yourself." She nodded slowly. "Maybe I never did." Holden studied her for a moment longer, then said quietly, "Don't lose what makes you human, Sergeant. The Army has plenty of weapons. It doesn't need another one that bleeds." And with that, he left her to the silence she seemed to wear like armor. That night, she couldn't sleep. The desert wind howled outside, carrying the faint metallic scent of dust and gun oil. She dreamed of the shot again, but this time, the bullet never stopped. It flew endlessly, passing over mountains, cities, oceans, until it turned back toward her. She woke up gasping, sweat soaking her shirt. Diaz's voice came softly from the cot across the room. "You okay?" "Just a dream. Same one?" She nodded. "Same one." Diaz sat up, rubbing his face. "You're not the only one feeling it, you know. Jenkins hasn't spoken since we got back." Miles keeps replaying the footage from the scope, like it's a movie. Maybe that's their way of making sense of it, she said quietly. And yours? She stared at the floor. Cleaning my rifle. The next few days blurred into routine. She trained new recruits on marksmanship, demonstrating techniques that left them speechless. Her calm, steady demeanor became legendary. But inside, something was fraying. Every sound of a rifle shot during training made her flinch slightly. Every time a young soldier cheered for a bullseye, she felt a twist in her gut. They celebrated the skill. She had lived the consequence. During one session, a young corporal asked eagerly, "Sergeant Carter, how does it feel knowing you made the longest shot in history?" Emily paused, her hand tightening on the rifle. "It feels heavy," she said finally, "because distance doesn't make a target less human." The corporal blinked, unsure how to respond. The others went quiet. She stood, ending the lesson early. Diaz caught up with her outside. "You can't keep talking like that, Em. They look up to you." "I didn't ask them to," she said flatly. "No," he replied, "but they need to. You're what keeps them believing that skill means survival." She looked at him, her voice low. "Belief gets you through the day, Diaz. Guilt keeps you honest." Weeks passed. Her story spread beyond the base, leaked through whispers, then to the media. The headline appeared on every screen back home. "American female sniper makes 4,200-meter kill, longest in history." She was given a temporary leave to the States. The flight home felt like moving between worlds, from dust and silence to cities that glittered with artificial light. People applauded at the airport when they recognized her uniform. Reporters followed her down the terminal. One of them shouted, "Sergeant Carter, what were you thinking in that moment?" She didn't stop walking. "That I didn't want to think," she said quietly. In D.C., the Pentagon ceremony was televised. She stood on a stage under blinding lights, flanked by generals and senators. The applause was thunderous. Cameras flashed. Holden's words echoed in her mind. "The more they lift you up, the less you belong to yourself." She smiled politely, shook hands, accepted the medal, and felt nothing. That night, she sat alone in her hotel room overlooking the city. The world below buzzed with life, cars, laughter, music. But in her reflection, she still saw the desert. A knock came at the door. It was Diaz. "Guess who's on TV?" he said, turning on the screen. The broadcast showed footage of her ceremony, commentators talking about her composure and skill. "They're calling you the Wind Reaper now," Diaz said. "Pretty dramatic, huh?" Emily's face remained expressionless. "They make it sound like a video game." Diaz sat across from her. "They don't see what we see. To them, it's distance and data. To you, it's faces and silence." She looked out the window again. "You ever wonder who they were? The people we take out?" He hesitated. "You can't think like that, Em." "I can't not." Her voice broke slightly. "The man I shot, Volk, he was someone's son. Maybe even someone's father. We fight for what we believe in, but they do too. That doesn't make it easier to end them." Diaz leaned forward. "You saved lives, Carter. You ended a monster. That's what matters." She didn't answer. Her eyes glistened with the kind of emotion soldiers weren't supposed to show. The next morning, she received a call from General Holden. "Carter," he said, "there's talk of assigning you stateside as an instructor. Safer, cleaner work. You'd be training the next generation of snipers." Her silence stretched long enough that Holden asked, "You still there?" "Yes, sir." "I'm here. So what do you say?" She exhaled. "I'll think about it." He paused. "You've earned the right to rest, Carter. Don't let the war follow you." She smiled faintly. "It already has, sir." Weeks later, she visited the shooting range outside Quantico, where recruits practiced. Rows of young soldiers lay prone, rifles steady, hearts full of dreams. She watched one of them miss a 500-meter target and curse under his breath. Emily knelt beside him. "You're aiming too fast." Breath first, thought second. He looked up. "Sergeant Carter?" She nodded. "You're the one who—" "Yes," she interrupted gently. "Now line up your sight again." The recruit took a breath, adjusted, and fired. The bullet hit center. He turned to her, grinning. "How's that?" Emily smiled softly. "Perfect." As she stood, the sound of the shot echoed around her, sharp, clean, familiar. For a moment, she let herself breathe it in. Not as a weapon, not as a legend, just as a soldier who understood the cost of perfection. That night, she returned to her quarters. The wind rustled through the trees outside, reminding her of the desert. She opened her rifle case one last time and ran her hand over the steel. There were no cheers now, no cameras, just her and the hum of silence. She whispered into the dark, "I hope you found peace, wherever you are." And maybe, somewhere across the distance that once divided her and her target, the wind carried her words away to a place where ghosts and heroes finally rest in the same quiet. Months passed since Sergeant Emily Carter traded desert winds for the sterile calm of Quantico's training compound. The war felt far away, now like a distant echo bouncing off walls she could no longer see. Her mornings began with routine. Coffee before dawn, a short run along the misty base perimeter, then hours on the range with new recruits. The sharp crack of rifles breaking the air was both comfort and curse. She had become something of a legend among the trainees. They whispered stories about her shot, the 4,200-meter miracle, and looked at her like a living myth. She didn't like it. Myths weren't real. They didn't wake up sweating in the middle of the night. Every shot her students fired reminded her of that one impossible bullet, how it cut through both air and soul. One afternoon, she was observing a young recruit named Maddox, who struggled with patience. He fired too quickly, too eager to prove himself. "Again," Emily said calmly. He chambered another round, frustrated. "Ma'am, I've done this 6 times. 7 will make you better," she interrupted. He adjusted, took the shot, and missed again. Emily crouched beside him, her tone even. "You're looking for confirmation before you pull the trigger. But the moment you doubt, you've already lost accuracy. Breathe like the wind doesn't exist. You don't control it, you work with it." He hesitated, then nodded, breathing slowly. The next shot rang true, striking the center. He turned to her, wide-eyed. "Ma'am, how do you stay that calm?" She smiled faintly. "Because I know what happens when you're not." He didn't understand the weight of her words, and she didn't explain. That night, she walked along the empty range. The sun had long sunk below the horizon, painting the sky in bruised shades of violet. She looked out over the fields, the still targets glowing faintly in the moonlight. In that moment, the world felt suspended between peace and memory. Then she heard footsteps. Diaz appeared from the shadows, hands in his pockets. "I should have known I'd find you out here." Emily smirked. "Couldn't sleep?" "Never can. Too quiet without sandstorms." They stood in silence for a while, the wind cool against their faces. "Do you ever miss it?" Diaz asked finally. "The war?" He nodded. She thought for a moment. "No, I miss the clarity. Out there, you knew your purpose. Here, you just teach it to others." Diaz chuckled softly. "You're still the same Carter, always chasing meaning." "Meaning keeps you alive," she replied. "Maybe," he said. "But sometimes Letting go keeps you human. A few days later, she was called into the director's office. A man in a dark suit was waiting inside, standing beside Colonel Reeves, the head of the program. "Sergeant Carter," Reeves began, "this is Agent Morris, CI, a Special Operations Liaison." Morris extended a hand. "It's an honor, Sergeant." Emily shook it warily. "What's this about?" Morris opened a folder. Inside was a grainy photo of a man with sharp eyes and a jagged scar across his temple. "This is Viktor Sokolov," Morris said. "Former Spetsnaz sniper. Works freelance now, mercenary operations, black contracts. We believe he's responsible for multiple assassinations across the Middle East." Emily studied the photo. "Why tell me?" Morris slid another picture forward, this time of a U.S. convoy destroyed in the desert. "He's been picking off our officers from extreme range. 2 of our best teams already tried to neutralize him. None returned." Reeves crossed his arms. "They need someone who understands that range. Someone who's been there before." Emily's eyes hardened. "You're asking me to go back?" Morris nodded. "We're not asking, Sergeant. We're requesting your expertise. You wouldn't be in the field directly, just tactical oversight, maybe one shot if necessary." She leaned back. "You said that last time." "This time," he replied, "you won't be alone." Diaz already agreed. Her breath caught slightly. "He what?" "He said you'd need him." Emily stared down at the photos again. The images blurred with memory, the scope, the silence, the impossible distance. "Give me 24 hours, she said quietly. That night, she couldn't sleep. The desert called to her again, not through nostalgia, but through unfinished echoes. She took out her rifle case and ran a cloth over the metal, each motion precise and reverent. It was more than a weapon. It was her shadow. The news played faintly in the background. Chaos in foreign territories, whispers of escalating conflicts. The world hadn't changed. Only her position in it had. At 2:17 a.m., she texted Diaz, "If we go back, we finish it right." He replied instantly, "We always do." 3 weeks later, Emily stepped onto the tarmac of Forward Base Sentinel, a joint task base nestled against the jagged cliffs of northern Afghanistan. The air smelled of dust and oil. It was like stepping through time. The soldiers she passed saluted her with a kind of reverence that made her uncomfortable. Her legend had traveled faster than she had. Diaz greeted her near the hangar, grin wide as ever. "Didn't think I'd see you back in this sandbox." She smirked. "Guess I missed the heat. Liar, always." They shared a quiet laugh, one that said more than words could. Their mission was clear but brutal. Locate Sokolov. Confirm position and eliminate the threat before he could strike another U.S. convoy. Intelligence indicated he was operating from a ridge, deep in enemy territory, high ground, with 3,000 meters of open terrain below. Emily examined the satellite maps. He's smart. This setup gives him total visual control. He'll anticipate a counter-sniper team. Diaz pointed at the map, which is why we give him what he expects, but not where he expects it. They built a plan together, each word blending familiarity and trust. She noticed how naturally it came back, the rhythm, the instincts, the quiet understanding of shared danger. The following dawn, their small unit moved out. Emily lay prone beside her rifle, the landscape stretching endlessly ahead, waves of sand and rock shimmering under the sun. Diaz watched through binoculars, scanning for the faintest glint of metal or movement. Then he froze. Got him. Ridge line, 10 o'clock. Barely visible, he's watching the convoy route. Emily's heart rate slowed automatically, her mind switching into the calm of a sniper's trance. Every breath, every heartbeat became calculation. Range? 3925 meters, Diaz whispered. Wind direction? 2 clicks east, 15 knots. Emily adjusted the scope, her body still as stone. She hesitated for a moment, not out of fear, but something deeper. A quiet voice inside whispered, "Do you really want to live this again?" Then, through the scope, she saw Sokolov shift slightly, his eye pressed to his own rifle scope. He was hunting too. The moment balanced on a knife's edge. Diaz murmured, "He's got a shot lined up. He's aiming at the convoy." Emily exhaled slowly. Not today. She adjusted for wind, elevation, spindrift. Her finger brushed the trigger, then froze. Sokolov turned, as if sensing her. Their scopes aligned, 2 ghosts of war staring at each other across nearly 4 kilometers of air and fate. For an endless second, time stopped. Then she whispered, "This ends with us." She fired. The recoil jolted her shoulder. The round vanished into the shimmer of heat. 5, 6. 7 seconds later Sokolov fell. Diaz exhaled sharply. Direct hit. Emily didn't move. She watched through the scope, breathing slow, eyes unreadable. Finally, she whispered, "He was good." Diaz nodded. Not good enough. As they packed up, the desert wind howled again, soft, familiar, and infinite. Emily looked across the horizon, where sand and sky merged. For the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. Not triumph, not relief, but release. "Guess that's it," Diaz said. "Yeah," she replied. "For both of us." He grinned. "Think they'll write another story about this one?" She shrugged. "Maybe, but I'm done being the headline." As they walked back toward the waiting chopper, the rising sun burned behind them, long shadows stretching across the earth. 2 soldiers walking away from history, leaving silence where the echoes used to be. The helicopter blades cut the air like a mechanical heartbeat as Emily Carter and Diaz ascended from the ridge. The desert stretched beneath them, a mosaic of burnt gold and jagged shadows. Each gust of wind carried a faint memory of battles. Fought, friends lost, and the ghosts she could never quite leave behind. Emily stared out the window, her reflection merging with the horizon. For years, she had been defined by distance, by meters, by targets, by impossibly precise bullets. Now, the numbers no longer mattered. Only the quiet followed her. Diaz broke the silence. "You're awfully quiet. I'm thinking," she said, "about everything we've done. All of it." He nodded, understanding, though he knew better than to push her to speak. The truth of combat could only be faced on one's own terms. Weeks later, Emily returned to civilian life. The Pentagon had tried to keep her in the limelight, but she declined every interview and television appearance. Instead, she asked for a small, discreet posting training elite units in closed compounds, away from prying eyes. She taught, but her lessons were about more than shooting. They were about patience, restraint, and understanding the cost of every decision. Her trainees still whispered about her record-breaking shot, calling her ghosts wind, but Emily rarely spoke of it herself. The legend had grown beyond her control, and she no longer cared. Fame had never been her goal. Survival, precision, and conscience, that was all that mattered. At night, she often found herself thinking about the men and women whose lives had intersected with hers in the desert. Soldiers she had saved, enemies she had ended, and friends who hadn't returned. Their faces appeared in her dreams, some angry, some serene, some indistinguishable from the wind itself. She had learned to accept the weight of these memories, not by forgetting, but by carrying them silently. Each memory was a tether to the humanity that war tried to strip away. Diaz visited when he could. Their friendship had become one of the few constants in a life defined by uncertainty. "You ever regret it?" he asked one evening as they sat on a quiet balcony, watching the city lights below. Emily thought about the 4,200-meter shot, about Volk, about every decision that had come since her first deployment. "No," she said finally, "not regret, only responsibility." Diaz nodded. "I get that. You should," she replied, half smiling. "You were there too." Months passed, and Emily slowly adjusted to the rhythm of civilian life. She moved into a small apartment near the coast, overlooking the Atlantic. The sound of waves replaced the drone of helicopters, and the smell of salt air replaced gunpowder and dust. Here, the world was simple. People argued about mundane things: traffic, coffee, the weather. The stakes were smaller, safer. But even here, her past followed her in quiet ways. A man on the pier would glance at her rifle case with curiosity. A local shopkeeper recognized her from an old news article. Children asked questions she didn't want to answer. Yet Emily found solace in small, grounding routines. Morning runs along the beach, evening walks at sunset, cleaning her rifles meticulously, even though they were rarely fired. She began writing journals she never intended anyone to read, cataloging everything she had seen, everything she had done, everything she had felt. The act of recording it was cathartic, a way to face the ghosts without letting them consume her. One rainy afternoon, a letter arrived. The envelope was simple, stamped with official insignia. She hesitated before opening it, knowing the contents would pull her back into memories she thought she had contained. Inside was a note from General Holden. It read, "Sergeant Carter, you have served your country with unparalleled skill and honor. The mission in Afghanistan was successful because of your leadership and expertise. Though I suspect you wish to remain in the shadows, know that your service is recognized and forever respected. Stay safe." Holden Emily folded the letter carefully, placing it on her desk. She felt a faint warmth, not pride, but acknowledgement. For the first time, someone had recognized not just her shot, but her humanity. Spring arrived, and with it a small ceremony in her hometown. A park, a few dozen people, a plaque acknowledging her service and record-setting marksmanship. Emily didn't want attention, but she attended at the insistence of her parents. The ceremony was modest, unlike the grand parades she had endured. Neighbors clapped, a few journalists took pictures, but the crowd was small enough that she could breathe. When asked to speak, Emily approached the microphone quietly. Her eyes scanned the faces before her: family, old friends, curious strangers. "I'm not here to be a hero," she said, voice steady. "I'm here to acknowledge that we do what we must, often in silence, often in ways the world will never understand. The decisions we make have consequences, and the cost is never fully seen. I hope that when you leave here, you remember that every action has weight, and sometimes the greatest courage is simply living with it." The crowd was silent, then applauded softly. Emily stepped back, her heart lighter. That night, she walked along the beach, the waves lapping at her boots. The wind moved through her hair, cool and steady, carrying memories of the desert and whispers of past missions. She thought of Diaz, still working in special operations, still carrying his own ghosts. She thought of the desert ridge, of the impossible shot, of Volk. She knelt, letting the sand sift through her fingers. For a long time, she just listened, the sound of the ocean, the wind, the quiet world around her. Then she whispered into the darkness, "I see you, I hear you, and I will carry you not as legend, not as hero, but as memory." And that is enough. For the first time in years, Emily felt the weight lift, if only slightly. She stood, brushed the sand from her pants, and walked toward the horizon. The wind followed, gentle and relentless. Somewhere beyond the edge of sight, ghosts and living met, and the line between them blurred. But Emily Carter walked on, not because the world demanded her legend, but because she had finally earned peace. She had become more than a record, more than a sniper, more than Ghost's wind. She had become herself. And for the first time, that was enough.